everybody, welcome back. This is Jennifer J with Moving Forward. Merry Christmas. If I don't talk to you before that, I am getting ready to leave here and go back home for Christmas. So hopefully I'll be able to keep up with the recordings, but if not, please show me grace and just go back and watch some of the older ones that you haven't gotten to yet. If you're new here, welcome. I know I have some new subscribers this week, so thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you don't know, I didn't know because I'm not technology is not my strong suit. I'm challenged in that area, but so I will just tell you, if you are new, if you want to get to all the videos, if you go to the top toolbar and click on videos, it'll show you all of them. So there's probably a whole bunch you haven't seen, and if you start with number 1 and play them through, it's a whole continuing story. So if you want to see what brought me to this point, that's how you can do that. If you've been with me a while, welcome back. Thank you for coming back. Today I'm going to be in Numbers chapter 20. That is Old Testament, but very relevant story for today. So we're going to talk about that. It's in the Old Testament. It's just in the first 5 books of the Bible. So there's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and then Numbers. So it's the 4th book in the book of law. So go there, and then the big number is 20. That's going to be the chapter, and then the little numbers, we're going to read 1 through, I don't know, like 13, I think. So it is kind of a lot, but there's so much in there. I don't want to miss any of it, so I am going to read it today. Sometimes I have you guys read it yourself or whatever, but I am going to read it to you today, so you don't have to have your Bible with you. If you don't have it, I'll be reading it to you. So let's just start with that, and then I'll dig in. This is coming from a TDJakes. You know he's my favorite. No offense to Dr. Mackey. My pastor is my favorite, okay. But TDJakes is one of my favorites to watch online. So I see my pastor in person. But anyway, Numbers chapter 20. Then came the children of Israel, even the whole congregation, into the desert of Zin. The desert of Zin, if you look that up, it's going to be in the south portion of Israel. So it's in the southern region of today's, where today's Israel is, the desert of Zin. Anyway, in the first month, and the people abode in Kadesh. The desert of Zin is sometimes called the desert of Kadesh now, just if you're looking on a map trying to find it. And Miriam died there and was buried there. And there was no water for the congregation, and they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and the people chode with Moses and spoke, saying, Would God that we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. And why have you brought us up? Why have you brought the congregation of the Lord into this wilderness, that we and our cattle should die there? And wherefore have you made us to come up out of Egypt to bring us in unto this evil place? It is no place of seed or of figs or of vines or of pomegranates, neither is there any water to drink. And Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the congregation into the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and they fell upon their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared unto them. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Take thy rod, and gather thou the assembly together, thou and Aaron thy brother, and speak unto the rock before their eyes, and it shall give forth its water, and thou shalt bring forth to them water out of the rock. So thou shalt give the congregation and their beasts drink. And Moses took the rod from before the Lord, and he commanded him. And Moses and Aaron, as he commanded him. And Moses and Aaron gathered the congregation together before the rock, and he said unto them, Hear now, you rebels, must we fetch you water out of this rock? And Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he smote the rock twice, and water came abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their beasts. And the Lord spoke unto Moses and Aaron, Because you believe me not,
to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel. Therefore you shall not bring this congregation into the land that I have given them. This is the water of Meriah, because the children of Israel strove with the Lord, and he sanctified them. He was sanctified in them. Okay, so I'm sorry, I botched that all up in reading, but that gives you the idea of the story, right? The people have left Egypt. They're in the desert. There's no food. There's, they're talking about figs and pomegranates, and there's no seed. Like nothing grows here, right? There's no vines, and there's no water. And they're thirsty, and their beasts are thirsty. So their cattles and their donkeys and their camels, they're thirsty, right? Everybody's thirsty, and now they're fussing. They're fussing big. So several things that I want to bring out, and I'm going to try and do this justice because it was such an amazing sermon, but he brought out so many good points. So he says, first of all, there was no water for the congregation, and the people were angry at him, right? The people were arguing with him. Now let's not forget that Moses was also thirsty. Moses also had not had anything to drink. Moses and Aaron were just as thirsty as they were. They were just doing what God told them to do in leading the people out. But he didn't make the people go. He didn't hold them at knife point or sword point or whatever and say, you have to come with me. Like, they wanted to go, right? They wanted to leave Egypt. They had been slaves there. It was bad. They were beaten. They were not treated well at all. And they wanted to leave. They left on their own accord because they wanted to. But now they're angry. They're angry at Moses. So they're saying, why did you bring us here? What in the world? We could have died there. And I thought it was so funny. TDJakes said, like, why do they care where they die? Like, okay, they could have died there, but dead is dead, right? And so, yes, they could have died there, or they could die here. But really, what difference does it make? But that was their argument. Like, we could have stayed there and died. Anyway, I thought that was funny. But they're saying there's not only nothing that grows here, there's no water here. And so Moses and Aaron do what we should do when we're in a pickle, right? When things aren't going the way we think that they should be going, or we're in a jam, we need to go to the Lord, right? And that's what they did. They went and bowed their face before the presence of the Lord, and the Lord was there with them. And the New Testament tells us the Lord is with us all the time. He never leaves us. So, but he was there with them. They fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. And God spoke to Moses and told him what to do, right? And he will speak to us if we will just get on our face before him and ask him, what are we supposed to do? He will tell us. So, but what did he tell him to do? He said, take the rod and gather the assembly together, and you and Aaron speak to them and tell the rock to give forth water, and it will. So that was his instruction, right? Take the rod that I gave you, go and speak to the people, and tell the rock to bring forth water. Did he do that? He took the rod and he gathered the assembly, but did he speak to the rock and tell it to bring forth water? Nope. Moses took the rod from before the Lord, as he commanded him, and Moses and Aaron gathered the congregation together before the rock. And he said to them, hear now, you rebels, must we fetch you water out of this rock? What happened right there? Moses is angry at them, right? He's calling them rebels, and he says, must we fetch you water out of this rock? Is Moses and Aaron the ones fetching the water? God is the one that's going to do the miracle, not Moses and Aaron. And Moses lifts up his hand with the rod and he smote the rock. That means he hit the rock twice. Did God tell him to hit the rock? God told him to speak to the rock. And that's not what he did. Now, God still performed the miracle. The water still came out. The people drank. Their beasts drank. The cattle drank. Everybody had water, right? But there was a consequence because Moses didn't obey. There was a consequence. And what was that? He wasn't going to get to go into the promised land. He was going to die before they got there. The people would get there, but Moses wouldn't because he disobeyed. And he brought up another good point, TDJakes did, because he said, now Moses is in the ultimate promised land. He's in the eternal promised land because he is in heaven. Because if we go back to the New Testament, it does say that he was seen on the Mount of Transfiguration. So he is in heaven. He is with God now. He is there. But he didn't get to go into the promised land and see the promised land on this earth because he didn't obey. So Moses was angry at the people, and with just cause, okay? He's got thousands of people ragging on him, right? He's angry because they're not trusting. God had walked them, he had walled up the Red Sea and walked them out on dry ground and brought the Red Sea back on their enemies. I mean, they had seen some miracles, right? God had rained down bread from heaven when they complained about not having the food that they wanted. He brought quail in the evening, and like he performed all these ginormous miracles, and still they're not trusting him. They're whining and crying and complaining. And so yeah, Moses is angry at them, but he kind of took it a little too far. He's assuming that because he's angry, that God's angry. He's assuming that since he's having these emotions, that God must be having these emotions, and God didn't say that. God never indicated anywhere in this story that he was angry. He might have been angry, but he didn't indicate he was angry. He indicated compassion. He indicated the people are thirsty. I want to show them my power again. I want you to speak to the rock. Now, here's the thing. What does the rock represent in this story? The rock is Jesus. Jesus provides, and Jesus has living water. And all we have to do is speak to him to receive this living water. I loved that part. So I have heard that before. I've heard this theological comparison of Jesus and all of that, and I love it. But it was just so good to hear it this morning. And so TDJakes was saying that sometimes we have to walk through hard places, right? We're not all going to walk through the literal desert. I am, apparently, because he sent me to the desert. But he's not going to send us all to the desert. But he sends us through hard places. And why? Preparation. He's preparing us for something. So think about Moses. And Moses was raised in Egypt. He was a Hebrew, right? But God was sending the plagues to Egypt, and so all the firstborn were going to be killed, right? And so they had to put the blood on the doorposts. That's the Passover, when they passed over and didn't kill the firstborn in the houses that had the blood. And so the Israelites were saved, but the Egyptians were killed. Moses had been born an Israelite, right? He was Hebrew. But his mother had put him in a basket. Okay, that goes back further. Let me go back. I messed that up. So Herod was killing all the firstborn male, and Moses was going to be killed. She put him in a basket, put him down the river, and Pharaoh's daughter finds him and takes him in and raises him as her own. So he's raised an Egyptian. So he's not raised in the culture that he was born into. He's raised in this other culture. So he was talking about how he has this identity crisis, right? So he's raised doing that. but he is raised in the desert too. He's in the, and when he kills the Egyptian, let's remember Moses was a murderer. He kills an Egyptian, and he runs away to hide, right, for 40 years. And so God has prepared him to be in the desert. He's now in this desert, but he's used to it. Like, he's had some training. And so that's what God does for us. He gives us some training, right? We're going to have some training. And so we're going to go through some hard places. And he used the term the urgency of right now, and I liked that because there is urgency in right now. You know, if you go back and have, or if you have watched my whole story or heard it, or if you go back to watch it, a lot of people get wowed at me. They're like, wow, like you're in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and you read your Devo that the application is what God's told you to do, move now, and within 30 minutes you're driving 6 hours away to Phoenix and knocking on the door, you know, of OCJ Kids. And they're just like, wow, like I would have had my coffee first, or I would have taken a shower. I would have sat and talked about that for a while, or thought about it, or went, what am I supposed to do? But you just left. And I said, well, it said now. It didn't say in 10 minutes, or it didn't say whatever. It said now. I gathered my stuff and I left now. And I took it very, very literally and very seriously. And so when he said that the urgency of right now, that really struck a chord with me, because there is urgency in now. And when God tells you now, it means now, like right now. It doesn't mean in 10 minutes or after you've had your coffee or taken your shower or whatever. It means now. And so that's all that can mean. And so yes, there's urgency in right now. When God tells you to do it now, do it now. So also he said, keep it moving. Don't delay your assignment. Don't delay your assignment. When he says now, he means now. Get moving. Satan didn't create the desert. Oh, and I really liked that. Satan didn't create the desert. So they're in the desert, right? But Satan didn't create the desert. God created the desert. And everything that they need is there. They couldn't see that because they couldn't see any living, growing thing, and they couldn't understand how that was going to happen. But God was there, and that's all they needed. God can provide everything that they need. So he said, what do you do when what you're riding on gets tired? Okay, their camels were tired. Their donkeys were tired. They didn't have water either. They didn't have what they needed right then. They were getting tired and fussy. Have you ever had an animal that was fussy? Because I have. I've had dogs that have whined and cried and not liked their situation. You know, they bark when they're hungry, or they whine if they have to go in the crate. They don't like it when they're not. Even my daughter called this morning, and her dog was whining last night, was whimpering. She was in pain. Something was wrong. She was really worried about her because she was whimpering and communicating that something was wrong, right? So when our beasts or our animals get fussy, that's a whole other level of fussiness, right? And so he said, what do you do when even the animal you're riding on gets tired? And he said it's dangerous to rely on people. Moses was homeless. He was talking about that he'd been, you know, a Hebrew and then raised an Egyptian and then had to escape from there. So he was homeless. He understood homelessness. He understood not belonging anywhere. He understood being an outcast, being different. He couldn't go back to Egypt, right? I mean, he was out there. And so he said, what do you do when what you're praying for is a hard place? The Egyptians, I mean, the Israelites, the Hebrew people, they had prayed and prayed for deliverance, right? They had prayed to be delivered from this hardship of slavery under the Egyptian rule. And God delivered them, but he delivered them to the desert with no water
and no food growing. So he delivered them to a hard place, right? And what did he do when he delivered Moses? I mean, they were seeking him to kill him because he had killed this Egyptian, and he went off for 40 years to this foreign land. So God delivers us to hard places to prepare us for what's next. So sometimes he was talking about, praying to be pregnant, but then you pray for a child, but then you have to go through pregnancy, and pregnancy can be hard. Delivery can be hard. We don't always understand. And then in the Bible, the woman that had twins, but they strove together. They strove in her womb, they strove during delivery, and they strove with each other after they were born. And so we don't think about that. We got what we asked for, right? Prayed for a child, got two. We get what we ask for, but we don't understand that what we're asking for is going to be a difficult thing. And I'm not going to tell that story. Never mind. Anyway, it can be hard. So sometimes God delivers us in ways that don't make sense to us. But God's building our endurance in the hard places, and He is the rock. He is with me through the hard places. He doesn't leave me. He's going to be there. And there's power in your words. Speak life. God told him to speak to the rock. That's all we have to do. Speak to the rock. Jesus is the rock. Use your words. Speak out loud. Speak life. Talk to God. Tell him what you need. Remember that he might deliver it through a hard place, but he will give you what you need. So you've got the power in your mouth to change it. He quoted the verse, "Let the poor say I am rich." I love that. But God doesn't want us to complain. He doesn't want us to whine and cry about it. I've been guilty. If you've watched my story, I've cried a lot. I've complained a lot. Mostly I've wondered out loud. I've trusted God, but I've wondered out loud, how are you going to do this? But I think of my trip back from visiting my sister in Arizona when she was in the Verbo and asking God, I'm bawling my eyes out and just going, how am I going to do this? How am I going to leave this state and move 1,200 miles away? And how am I going to be able to afford it? And I don't have any family there, and boo-hoo, poor me. He provides family that moves here before I do. Actually, they didn't move here before I do, but they bought a house here that I could live in, rent-free. So now I have family here, I have a place to live. Everything's taken care of in the desert. Jennifer, quit worrying about it. Quit complaining about it. Quit crying about it. God's got you. And he's got you too. You guys, he's got you. So just speak it. Tell him what you need. I spoke it out loud. I was talking to God in my car, out loud, crying, literally talking to him, telling him what I need. And literally less than 5 minutes later, he provided it. He already knew he was going to provide it. He needed me to trust him. And so speak it to the Lord. He has everything we need. He has living water that, guys, if you haven't tasted it, it is so good and so refreshing. And all you got to do is ask him for it, man. Say, give me this living water. He will. And you can bet your life on it. He will. So I also, real quick, just want to touch on the first month. In the first verse, I was going to say this when I read it, but I had already stopped so many times to interrupt that I didn't. But I want to go back to it real fast before I close. It says, then came the children of Israel, even the whole congregation, into the desert of Zin in the first month. And I want to tell you what the first month was.
The first month was probably our April. So why was the first month not January? When they left Egypt, that was their new beginning. When they were going into the promised land, God wanted them to start over. This was their new beginning. And so it was probably April, but the month of Abib, I think they call it. I'm going to try and see if I can see it. The month, well, it doesn't say right there. Okay, but in the notes I read, and the theologians say the month of Abib, and that was about the month of April. They used a lunar calendar, which is different than our calendar, so it's, questionable the exact day, but it was about April, it was about springtime. So that was the first month, and that's why they call that the first month. And that's important because as you're studying your Bible and you read like the 9th month or whatever, it's important to know what time of year that really was, I guess. That's the only reason I wanted to bring that up. Anyway, I hope you guys have a Merry Christmas. I hope that you're going to get to see some family, and I hope that you understand the reason for the season. A lot of people say Jesus is the reason for the season, and that's really pretty and whatever. But truly, I think we're the reason for the season, right? Jesus came for us so that we could have him in our hearts, so that we could live forever with him, so that we could have a relationship with him forever. He came, he left heaven where he had everything he could ever want. And he left it there and became a human. That'd be like this isn't even going to be a very good comparison, but imagine if you left your body and became an ant, the little insect, because the little ants were having trouble and they weren't going to be able to have a relationship with you unless you became one of them. And then you could save them all and they could all have a relationship with you forever. Like, that seems ludicrous, right? That seems ludicrous. I'm going to tell my family, hey Dad, I'm going to leave now and I'm going to go be one of them. But that's what he did. That's how much he loved us. He left his throne on glory and he came down and became a human and lived a life. He didn't come down as a full-grown person. He was in the womb. He was birthed. He grew up. He went through all the stages that we go through, so he understands. He has been there, literally been there, done that. And he did that for us. So people say Jesus is the reason for the season because Jesus was born, but I think we are the reason for the season because he was born for us. He did that for us. So if you don't know him, I pray that you would stop and talk to him today. Ask him to be the Lord of your life. He will. He wants to. He wants you back. He wants a relationship with you. And if you do know him, I just am so grateful for you. And I just pray that you would continue to study his word and dig into the Bible. I'm going to try to link this sermon to my page so that you can see the whole thing. It was really good. TDJakes does it way better than I do. But it is good. And so Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.